Hi, everyone. It's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook. And I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Elise Rogers. Lauren is a certified holistic sexuality educator and embodied intimacy and relationship coach. She's the founder of Sex Ed for You, where she provides clear, compassionate, and comprehensive guidance on intimacy, relationships, sexual health. After being raised in a high-control religion and getting married at 21, Lauren fought her way out to become the person she needed most. Her desire to understand her relational missteps, like her decade-long marriage to her daughter's gay father, led her to become a certified holistic sexuality educator. Lauren creates shame-free spaces where she invites individuals and couples to navigate complex topics like long-term partnerships, consensual non-monogamy, life transitions, purity culture, and LGBTQIA two-spirit plus issues. As a purity culture survivor, Lauren now delights in her love story with her second husband, Trey, a partnership that proudly centers agency and autonomy. Welcome, Lauren. That's a great write-up.
I literally was full of smiles hearing that write-up. It's always such a gift to hear where I am now and where I've come from. So thank you for having me, Janice. Thank you.
Well, and speaking of where you came from, I'm all kinds of curious. So I'd love to know more about your growing up and kind of the role that religion played, especially purity culture for you. So if you don't mind, please tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I would love to give some added details, especially for your audience, because I know we're all in good company. We understand the different idiosyncrasies of the various cults and religions that exist in this country and around the world. So I live right smack dab in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is where Thomas Road Baptist Church is located, which is where Jerry Falwell and all of that form of evangelicalism exists. My parents did not grow up inside of a Christian faith, but both found their way to Liberty University in the very early years of all that became the moral majority and those types of infiltrations of faith into politics that the United States is seeing now as well. So I deeply believe that my parents wanted a different life for me and my other 4 siblings. I'm the oldest of 5 and very typical oldest daughter raised in a religious space. I don't think they had any ill intent. I think that they truly thought, oh, well, I was harmed in these ways in this secular world, and let's protect my daughter in this way. So they both graduated from Liberty University. Then they found themselves inside of the Presbyterian realm of religion, which then we found Reformed Presbyterianism. So for those who might not be familiar, this is the Calvinist principles. These are tulip. Basically, you are depraved. You are scum of the earth. You are at the bottom of the ocean. I think for them, this had felt sweet. I think for them, it felt hopeful. Having grown up in that, I, from the time I could speak, was reciting things like, I am a sinner in the sight of God, justly deserving of his displeasure. Those were things that I knew before I knew of my talents and the joys I brought to the world. Again, I do not think that my parents intended for me to grow up with this skewed understanding of personhood. And yet it worked. Indoctrination does its job. So I grew up also at kind of the dawn of purity culture when Joshua Harris's book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, was flying off shelves, when Homeschooling was like this fad. I was homeschooled. I was all of these things. And I don't think anyone knew what they were doing, Janice. I think everyone was just kind of going, oh, this sounds good. This whole idea of calling back upon the courtship model. I remember turning around 13, 14 and getting handed this book that was about 4 inches thick that was called Wing to Wing, Oar to Oar, Restoring Relationships Back to this Courtship Model, which for your listeners, they'll be very, it's familiar, this idea of women as property, and that I belonged to my father. I belonged to God. I had a purity ring from the time that I was 12, and that I was to be given to my husband on my wedding day. What's so precious is that, and I've heard you ask other guests the same thing, was I all in? Did I think that I was doing anything wrong or that anything was weird? No. Like, I was just living blissfully as a person in a white body. I benefited to a certain extent from the ways the system had been set up, right? I had been preached this gospel of this is for your ease, right? Your best job in life is to be a mother and a wife, and then everything will be easy for you. So I was just floating along on my bed of roses. I ended up, we'll skip so much of the story, but engaged at 21 to a man 7 years older who had also grown up deeper in the South in purity culture, also come to Liberty University. And we were scheduled to get married in November of 2007. And out of the blue, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And
oh my gosh.
it was this whirlwind that I think it was at the beginning of the end. Many of your guests have said a similar thing, right? Like, what was the cataclysmic event that kind of started the unraveling? She got sick. She's dying. She's been given weeks to live. Everybody's asking her, is there anything you want to see happen before you're gone? She says, yes, I would love to see Lauren get married. So we bump our wedding up.
No pressure there.
No pressure there. We bump our wedding up from November to May. We get married 10 days after her diagnosis. She dies 2 weeks after we're married.
Oh, wow, that's so awful.
I weep for that little Lauren. I weep now knowing what I know about developmentally where I was, developmentally how much more I had to do. And my mother's death triggered in my precious ex-husband years of deep, deep, deep anxiety and depression. So my mother's death, it unlocked something in him. He became a raging alcoholic. And so wherein I should have been free to be grieving the loss of a mother, I instead was dealing with a alcoholic husband who was dealing with these psychosomatic illness emergency room every week. Anyway, it was a miserable season that I should have, in retrospect, annulled our marriage. That would have been a wise decision. I should have done so many things, but I didn't, because the world that I had grown up in said that the divorce was not an option. I love the name of this podcast and your work. I didn't believe it was an option. I didn't believe I had a choice at this time. I believed that since I had been a virgin on my wedding night, that I now belonged, body, heart, and soul, to this person. So I existed in that world for a long, long time. I got pregnant and had a wonderful daughter. And then years later, I'm running a nonprofit organization that focuses on maternal health, on the health and well-being of people who get pregnant from preconception to postpartum. And one of our board members keeps sending me these messages that says, "Are you okay?" And I keep thinking she's talking about organizational difficulties, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's stressful. We're about to hit year 10. Like, this is amazing. We're growing. Yeah, I'm okay. And she goes, no. I keep having dreams about you. Are you okay? So we go on a walk. And for the first time ever, I open my mouth and the truth spills out.
Wow.
This is 2017. And I tell the whole story. I talk about these parasomnias that my husband has these 3 times a week, these different personalities that he takes on, this horror that I'm living with.
Yes.
And it was wild, Janice. Her jaw is on the floor. She's naturally saying, "Oh my goodness." And she goes, "What about therapy?" And I said, "Oh, I can't go to therapy. My husband will just say, 'Are you tattletaling on me?'" And she goes, "No, no, no, you can go to therapy." This is a woman inside of the church that I belong to. Anyway, it didn't take more than one counseling session for this counselor also to say, "Why are you choosing to stay in this?" And I literally remember saying to her, "Choice? I don't have a choice. This is marriage. You stay in marriage." And she said, "No, no, no, Lauren, like this is a cycle of abuse that you're experiencing." And I remember her describing the cycle of abuse for the first time. So we set some boundaries, and she said, "How about this? How about if you can avoid any of these things before you see me again next week, great. We can stay. We'll work on some things to maintain your marriage. How about if one of these boundaries is broken between now and then? How about we do a season of separation?" I'm like, "Oh, great." I go home. I tell my husband. He's like, "Great, great. Of course I can do those things." No, all of those things out the window within the first week.
Wow.
Over the course of the next year, I work through separation and divorce. As I'm doing that, I realize that the system does not celebrate healing, that the system and the religious body that I was a part of benefits off of my suffering because that keeps me connected to them. And everything starts to fall away. Everything gets more clear. As I heal, I lose. As I heal, my community starts to fall apart, and I end up a year later filing for divorce, and not only losing a marriage, losing everything. Every single solitary thing. I end up living in a basement apartment. I have $500 a month to my name. My husband, ex-husband now, but then husband, loses complete custody because he relapses on alcoholism and has 6 months to earn back any rights of visitation. It was the most beautiful falling apart that ever could have happened because up until that point, again, I had not been able to see what so many else could see so clearly because I was benefiting and I was comfy enough to exist with inside a system. But once I saw that I had tried to play the game their way, I had tried to follow their rules, and still had failed, then everything became clear, the ways in which those in non-heteronormative spaces, those in not white bodies, those who do not ascribe to the same philosophies had been treated with hatred and disdain. I thought I could never go back. And then I started looking at my sexuality saying, well, wait, if I'm not a virgin, am I a whore? What happens now? And that sent me on a delicious spiral to reclaiming my sexuality. And the more I got into it, the more I thought, I want to go back to school for this. And I had never completed any form of degree. And so I found a program that could certify me in holistic sexuality education. And at that point, I thought, oh, I'll just apply this to my work in maternal health because reproductive health, maternal health, that's pretty close. But 6 months into school, I was like, oh, this is my calling. This is what I want to do because I'm not alone. As your audience well knows, there are many of us who were kept from vast amounts of education that we have an ethical right to. And so opened the doors to this business in 2022. And now I spend all day, every day with folks around the world, helping them restore and reclaim and reaccess their inherent sexuality and helping them understand why I deeply believe the World Health Organization says that sexual health is fundamental to the well-being of individuals, families, and communities. Because I think when we understand consent, when we understand how to delight in our own bodies and the bodies of others, how to protect and respect the sexual values of ourselves and others, we could heal the world. So that's where I am now.
So Beautiful. If we were in a movie, I would stand up and cheer. This is the wonderful part after you've gone through just so much incredible sorrow and so many obstacles to overcome. And you had lost your mom at such a young age. You're grieving and mourning and trying to figure out how to navigate the world now as a married person, then as a young mom, without your own mom there. I have no idea how much help your dad was if he was stuck in patriarchal religion and also mourning the loss of his life partner.
Yes, it also triggered in him a lot. She was his rock. They had a beautifully affectionate marriage, right? I think one of the most glorious pieces of going back and reclaiming your own story is being able to separate out that which was not okay and detrimental, and then being appreciative for the little things that I did see. So I did see a lot of affection between them. I think that she supported him in a way none of us even understood. And so he fell apart. Yeah, he ended up getting remarried 6 months in, and then showed
Whoa.
up at my house one day 4 years into their marriage and basically said, that woman that I married, pardon my language, but this is what he said, is a money hungry bitch. And I've really
Oh.
been in the relationship with the true love of my life, whom he reconnected with on Facebook from high school. And so he'd been having an affair behind the scenes on
Oh
this woman that he
my.
had married. It was
Oh,
delightful. And
wow.
it's funny to look back and go, oh, what knowledge I did have, because I looked him in the eyes and I said, "Get out of my home." And I don't know how that little Lauren, who was still pretty indoctrinated and was living in the system, knew that. But there was a line, which was, I have a daughter and we don't treat women that way. And until you can
Mm.
understand the way in which you are using women in your story, get out of my home.
Hmm.
Yeah, and we haven't
Was
spoken.
the relationship? Oh, you haven't spoken since then. That
Mm-mm.
was the end of that.
I've
Wow.
written a couple letters that have said,
Mhm.
I'd love to, rediscuss kind of where I am now, especially as I
Right.
deconstructed and separated
Right.
myself from religion. I was like,
Hmm.
the the reasons why I did what I did then are still vastly different. I still, you know, would be open to a conversation, but that would need to include accountability on all parts. And if
Right.
that's
Right.
not something they're interested in coming to the table with, that's of your decision. And nope, nope, he lives in the same
Wow. And
town and no relationship,
what
which
about
is,
your siblings?
yes. So the, as you well know, white men benefit from these systems tremendously. And so I have three brothers under me, and none of them have really ever understood what happened, why this was all so detrimental. Nobody ever went to therapy of those three brothers after we lost our mother. There's a world in which they are still, I don't know, existing in. We have relationship, but it is surface level. Um,
Mm.
my baby sister, though, we are 11 years apart. She and I are incredibly close and have
Nice.
rebuilt and even continue to rebuild a glorious, glorious friendship and sisterhood. She also has done her work to deconstruct and find, incredible mental health help. And she's thriving. She's one of my
Yeah.
heroes.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. So do you think the brothers stayed in the religious fold? Like, has that played into kind of keeping surface level with them? Because I sure know with my clients that happens a lot.
Mhm. One of them has definitely stayed within and
Mm.
can't understand for the life of him how I have gotten to this point, in his words.
Mhm.
Um, the other two, not so much, which is funny. But again, I think when you haven't felt the blows, there's no real impetus to do the archaeological dig on, in what
Mhm.
ways does this system oppress? And
Mhm.
I think they can't understand me. Um, Yeah, and have used substance and a lot of other things to cope and exist, and
Yeah.
I adore them. I don't. It's so funny. It seems, and maybe you would be able to speak even more to this as I learned more and more about trauma. I learned more and more about the body's own safety-seeking strategies that it uses to survive, and that there are some things that we cannot actually do the work on until our nervous systems are able to do that work. And I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes look at my precious brothers right under me and think, I don't know if they could. I think there's still so much trauma there from the loss of our mother
Mm-hmm.
that it might ruin like I don't know if they could. I don't know if they're
Right.
able to.
Mm-hmm.
And so natural boundaries and, keeping the relationship surface level seems to be the most loving thing in this way.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
They get to decide if and when they are interested and want to do the work on themselves. But the people who come to you seeking help have already made a decision in their own favor that they want to move forward. Are most of your clients from religious backgrounds, or is it a mixed bag?
It is a mixed bag. I would say that, as I'm sure you have seen from your audience and your work, there's something about when someone understands your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I began this work, I thought, oh, I'm sure I'll get one or two clients who, come to me for my story. No, I would say
Yeah.
a lot of people, even if it's not the purity culture necessarily, it will be some form of control or incomplete and inaccurate education that they were given about their bodies, the bodies of others. And they feel this beautiful camaraderie with, oh, if Lauren didn't know all this stuff until a few years ago, like there's hope for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that piece. I love the humanness of this work. That's like, oh, my friend, I was a late understander too. There is no shame in that. There's actually joy and play that can be found in that because now we're
Mm-hmm.
grown-ups, now we're
Mm-hmm.
adults, and our ability to learn new things can happen quickly because we're not
Mm-hmm.
children.
Right.
And so I think even if folks find me and they don't necessarily come from a purity culture background,
Mm-hmm.
they do celebrate that I haven't known this forever. Like we're on the same page that
Right.
that I am just as much of a nerd as they, and
Mm.
they appreciate my enthusiasm over the subject matter.
Right. That is so uh, beautiful and liberating to hear. I feel like so many people are saddled with shame, not just related to religious teachings around sex, but actually then, okay, they're able to extricate themselves from the religious indoctrination, but then they feel shame because they're behind their peers as far as their knowledge of the world and sexuality. And they just I hear from people in their 50s and 60s and even 70s who were saving themselves. So I got my air
Yes.
quotes going there. They didn't have any sex or even anything close to sex because they were waiting for God to send them a holy partner. And now their faith has dissolved and they have no idea how to talk to someone of the opposite sex, how to, or the same sex, how to have a date, even questions around, am I straight or am I not straight? Maybe I was just conditioned to think that I was straight. And actually, maybe you can touch on that a little bit because we mentioned in the intro that you were married to a person who was gay. And I
Yep.
bet you didn't know that going into the
Nope.
marriage.
Nope. One of the great downfalls of gentle audience of not being the sexual creatures who we are designed to be is that we can completely unintentionally harm ourselves and harm those we get into sexual relationship with. So yes, wasn't it delightful for me to find out that maybe a year after we were officially divorced, um, my ex-husband called me one night and told me he had found a life partner and that he was a man. And I
And
said,
you had no idea.
I had no idea when we were married. There were a few times where I would ask him, because there was periods of long sexual drought. There were periods I taught myself. Again, this is my subject matter, so I always find myself so easy to say these things. I had never masturbated. I never knew solo sexual pleasure because of the world that I existed in. I didn't know that girls could do that. Again, my air quotes, right? I had been taught that masturbation was a struggle of boys, that porn was the thing that boys were into, not girls. So I taught myself to masturbate deep into my marriage when there would be periods of sexual drought. And I was so worried that I was going to have an affair because I was so hungry for sexual attention. So there would be times when I would ask him about maybe a relationship with a colleague. He's an artist. He's a high-end wedding photographer. And so I would kind of inquire. There was one time we went to like a fancy dinner for these like high-end wedding vendors, and a wedding planner pulls me aside, this delightful gay man, and says, "You know he's on our team, right?" And that is the one memory I have, Janice. And now I look back and I'm like,
My
oh,
gosh.
that sweet guy was just trying to be like, you're in on this, right? Like a lavender marriage. Like, you're in on this, right? But no, and my ex-husband still says to this day that it had been so suppressed in his body that there was no same-sex play, joy, porn watching, anything. And I would have questioned this had not this become my profession, and had I not done research on this and found entire journal articles dedicated to exactly this thing. Folks who had grown up so suppressed. I mean, he grew up in like hellfire, brimstone Baptist religion, where they brought in speakers to talk about that homosexual behavior would have you burn at a different level. I mean, so this was negated in his nervous system so much that he had never allowed himself to even think about this. So it wasn't until he was well out of our marriage that this stuff even started to come to his mind. But no, it was hilarious. And then it was hilarious when he came out on socials, and I celebrated him. I was like, you know what? I am so happy for you. I actually have never been happier for you. This makes so much sense, and I love his partner now. We are such better co-parents and friends than we have done so much work to repair our relationship. It's delightful. It is delightful. And wasn't it hilarious how out of the woodwork, I started getting a slew of messages on social media and texts and emails from people who said, "Oh, I'm so sorry we didn't believe you when you were leaving your marriage. Now that I know he is gay, we like love you again." And to those people, I said politely, go F yourself. Goodbye. Because when it was me, when it was the woman, right, leaving, you had no grace, you had no understanding, you had no empathy. But now that there is a sexual sin more great than even you could have imagined before, now you're on Team Lauren. No, goodbye.
Wow.
You homophobic, go away.
Wow.
Go away. So it just continued to be even more clear that there is such a deficit of understanding around sexuality, around orientation, around intimacy, around sexual functioning, around what sexualization is. And I cannot tell you how much this work feels like a pain to purpose story, how much this feels redemptive in the best sense of the word, that for years I led Bible studies on purity, right? For years I had ladies in waiting groups, and now I'm educating.
That's just
people.
great.
Here we are now. But yes, to the sexual shame that so many feel late in life because they haven't explored possible orientations, to you, I say, if you are out there, this time is your time. I deeply believe we learn the things we're supposed to learn when we are supposed to learn them. And that if this is your time, oh my goodness, something beautiful is out there for you. And there is a person for you or persons for you that also need you. There are so many of my clients that I say, I don't know how to tell you this, but you are in good company. Company of people who have been doing their work and now are seeking to know their sexual selves before they go out into the marketplace. And you are going to be a service to anyone you date. Like, this work that you're doing now is going to have this ripple effect onto the lives that you now interact with, into the energies and the spirits of those people that you get to commune with in the most holy way. So, yes.
I love it. Yeah, it's true. Authenticity is a superpower, really. And when we do show up completely embodying our authentic self, it gives other people around us permission to be authentic too, to ask their own questions and question their beliefs and explore their feelings. And they don't have to hide it. And they don't have to feel shame around it. So I love the work that you are doing with clients, just providing a safe space for them. Some of them, I'm sure you are the first person that they have ever even raised these questions to or said, I think I might be gay or anything like that. And that is such a privilege, like an honor to be in that space when someone trusts us with something so important. I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about the importance of language. Because when I was reading through some of the writing that you had provided me with, you talk about how language can cause us to feel broken. So talk a little bit about the importance of language and that connection.
I love this question so much. One of my clients recently said, "Oh, yeah, it's just semantics." And I looked at them deep in the eyes and I said, "Oh, my friend, semantics are so important." I believe that there is this narrative, especially when it comes to people existing in female bodies or those existing outside of heteronormative existence or those not in a white body, wherein we pathologize, where we so easily go to the phraseology of, what is wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
And the deep impacts that so many of my clients have felt from that phrasing. The amount of folks who end up before me who desire to fix themselves so that they can be a better sex partner for someone else breaks my heart. And so my emphasis on us being very mindful of our wording, of our phrasing, is that we start to understand the origins and the roots of, where did these terms like "you're broken," where did they come from? What are their origin stories? And when you start to look at the roots of social work in the United States of America or therapy, they most often started with these white, and those times well-meaning people, but they were going into communities and deciding you aren't pure enough, right? You're not healthy enough. You're not fixed enough. And inserting their narrative as to what meant what was whole, what was healed. In my faith of origin, we did a lot of reciting the Nicene Creed. And if you go back to the Council of Nicaea, right, it was a bunch of white men deciding that women needed to be put in their place, right? It was things like, Tertullian saying that women are the root of all evil. And so when I speak on us really considering the power of wording, the power of phrasing, I mean that we really need to see, do we believe that? Do we align with who decided that thing?
Right.
Or is this something for us to really feel into? Because there are such frameworks such as asexuality. There are human beings out there who are not broken at all. They just, in their makeup, are not as hungry for, desirous of the amount of sexual interaction that Johnny, Susie, Mary might be.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
deeply believe that we need to normalize the various spectrums of existence in this culture, whether that is
Yeah.
who you love, how you show up, how often you want
Mhm.
sex. So many people
Mhm.
come to my care and then leave my care. And I always have these end questions like, what are some of the biggest things you learned or greatest surprises? And I'll never forget a client who said, when we began work, I just assumed that I would be having so much more sex by the end of our work together. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And what did you find instead? And she said, this is a person of female body. Oh, I'm not having more sex. I think I may be having less sex. I was like, and she goes, it's just better sex. I said,
Nice.
yes, right. I think that many of us have been lied to and given scripts to follow and been
Hmm.
told that we were broken because we weren't functioning according to that script. We weren't playing the role that someone else scripted for us. And so I would love for your audience to take away today this idea of whose script is it? Right? Who wrote this? And
Mhm.
did you consent to playing that role? And if
Mhm.
not, it is okay to go look up the author. It is okay to go find the playwright and say, do I align with their ideology? Do I align with their beliefs, how they view other people?
Mhm. Mhm.
Do they treat people like I would like people to be treated? And if not, it is okay to write your own script. It is okay to make values aligned decisions that feel juicy in your body when it comes to your
Mhm.
romantic relationships, your friendships, your body, how you
Mhm.
play sexually. And yeah, that most of the time, you're not broken. The script is.
Right. Oh my gosh. Here, here. I love everything that you just said. And certainly when it comes to feelings of shame,
Yes.
I'm thinking back to early scripts that we receive as children, often in religious families. And when I speak with my clients about shame, I tell them shame is something that someone has put on you or given to you. It's like they show up in front of you, they've got a bag in their hands that has the word shame written on it. They're trying to give you that bag. And at this point in your life, you can put up your hands and say, no, no, thank you. I won't take it. That's yours. You can have that shame. I refuse to take that shame. But we do have to examine then, uh, where did the shame come from? Who delivered that shame to us? What was possibly going on with them? But whatever it was theirs, and it was given to us, and we don't have to take it. We can return the gift.
Yes, I love that. And isn't it interesting that shame and guilt are the number one cause of sexual dissatisfaction and sexual dysfunction?
Mhm.
Shame and guilt, my friends, not some physical ailment, not some biological issue. Shame
Mhm.
and guilt are the number one cause of sexual dissatisfaction and dysfunction, which is why I think that my work is so quote unquote successful. And I wouldn't even say it's my doing, it's my client's doing, because rejoice in the fact that, yes, you can send that gift back, you can return it, you can say no thanks, and set yourself free. If shame and guilt are the number one cause of sexual dissatisfaction and sexual dysfunction, first of all, shame on the systems. Second of
Mhm.
all, wow, that means that it's not something that's broken in you, especially if it's something that somebody else gave to you. No,
Mhm.
we can return that gift.
Yes. Yeah. Talk a little bit, if you would, about, and it ties right in with this, of course, the idea of agency and autonomy. And when we grow up, if we grow up in very religious homes, fundamentalist religious homes, we are denied agency and autonomy. We exist kind of just as extensions of our parents. We have to serve, we have to agree, be seen and not heard, those sorts of things. And we're not taught appropriately about boundaries and consent. We might not even understand or know that like you in your story, when you were saying choice, I don't have a choice. So, how does that factor into the work that you do with people, teaching them about agency and authority, or agency and autonomy, their own authority?
Amen. Love this question. When I grew up, I was always quoted the Christian Bible verse of the two shall become one. A man shall leave his father and his mother, and, the two shall become one. This idea of leaving and cleaving.
Oh, yeah.
To shake it off. It's
right.
So it literally feels yucky in my mouth, you all. And so I was also handed books on marriage that said things like, a husband's sin is the wife's sin. This idea that you should not be discussing with anyone other than your husband the private matters of your marriage. As we can see, because you all know the ending, that did not go well. That was very toxic and detrimental to my experience as a person in my own human body. And so, as I went back to school and started learning about these concepts of consent, which you're exactly right, Janice, I don't know if I knew the word. I mean, I knew the word, but I didn't think it applied to me.
Right. Or with regard to sexuality.
Yeah. No. You were to give the one piece of sex advice I got from my mother as she's dying. So please imagine your mother's in a wheelchair, literally skin and bones, because she's about to die from pancreatic cancer. And the day before my wedding, which is now 6 months earlier than it was supposed to be, I heard, take care of your husband's needs and all will be well. I always think it's the funniest thing in retrospect because my husband was gay. So there was no taking care of my husband's needs. His needs were never taken care of. I mean, it's just the irony. If you don't laugh, you just cry forever. Sweet Lauren spent a decade trying to, quote unquote, fulfill this man's needs. Oh my goodness. So detrimental. So when I went back to school and started learning about consent, started learning about these Jungian principles such as individuation and the process within the psychological development of individuating from parent, I started to see, oh my goodness, I was never encouraged to individuate. I was never encouraged to take responsibility for my own needs, wants, and desires. I was never encouraged to even be able to identify them. Never.
Right.
My sole purpose was to provide for the needs of another. It never occurred to me that I had an ethical responsibility to know my own needs. It's blew my mind. And then when I saw that, oh my goodness, desires, when I learned about Dr. Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, when I learned about, when I can voice my own needs, wants, and desires, then someone else gets to stand in their own agency and decide whether or not they are able to or interested in providing me with that need. Everybody gets to choose. Oh my goodness. So it has become the very bedrock of the framework of my work. I have many clients who find me, because I work with a lot of partners who have come from a traditional marriage and family counselor type of thing, who prioritize the relationship as their client. So they wanted to keep the relationship together. And so the very first thing I tell my clients is, hi, I prioritize each of your individuality. So if you are looking for someone to keep your relationship together, you've found the wrong girl, go to a different place. I am not that person. I am far more interested in each of you flourishing as a human being. And it could be that this relationship is not the space for that. And if that is the
Wow.
case, we will work on consciously uncoupling you in a place of love, because I believe there's a way to do that as well. And we will learn, most importantly, how to identify your own personal and sexual needs, wants, and desires and communicate that to one another, how
Mm-hmm.
to identify your own domain, that which you have a right to and a responsibility for, and start to communicate in that space. Dr. Betty
Beautiful.
Martin says that every aspect of human relationship is a negotiation of the third domain, the space between us and the other. And love that so much, because you get to be who you are, Janice. I get to be who I am. And then this podcast is a perfect example, is the space between. I'm not losing any of me. You're not losing any of you. We're negotiating. We're playing up here in this third domain. And so in my work with people in couples, people in thruples, people in polycules, is to see how celebrated the agency of each individual is inside of this partnership. And where have we followed attachment patterns, old scripts? How are we showing up? What stories are we telling ourselves? And what stories are very true, right? Where is there oppression? And where is there just a story in our head? Where are we not asking for what we want sexually or relationally? How can we do that better? And then what I always say with my clients is check the data. Once we get better at voicing our needs, wants, and desires, then we get to see, are we in a partnership that can support those? And it just becomes a lot of fun, very clear, very celebratory of the individuals inside of the partnership, instead of this idea of enmeshment.
That sounds so healthy, like shockingly healthy compared to kind of the model of marriage that we were handed, coming from religious homes, and even just growing up in North America. I'm in Canada. You're in the United States. We were told there's a picture of marriage. Here's what it looks like, and if you have to suffer to keep it together, then so be it. There's nothing more important than preserving the marital union. But that's not true. That's baloney. There are other things that are important. And I love what you were saying too about encouraging people to explore. You and I didn't have the opportunity to explore even what we wanted or what was important to us, because that we were told what was to be important to us. And so again, the idea of having words, being able to talk about and identify, how do I feel in this situation? Do I have fear? What is my fear? What am I afraid of losing? And I think this is really significant when, in the demographic that I work with, people who have left religion, divorcing religion, just discovering who they are now without religion. And some of them might rush to non-traditional relationships and think, well, now I'm going to catch up on everything I missed, and we just need to open our marriage. And sometimes the other partner doesn't actually think so, but they're so scared that they will lose this. And so it can be so messy and painful and leave a lot of damage in its wake. So I recommend folks speak with you, an expert in the domain of sex and intimacy, before they kind of make that jump or make that leap. Is that something that people talk to you about as well?
All the time. All the time. It is one of my interesting niche specialties, is working with those who, yes, were never given a choice, and who have gone through the process of deconstruction and have decided, oh, okay, well, we're just going to open our marriage. One of us wants to have more sexual experiences. We feel robbed. We feel entitled to go do some of these things. And yes, it is one of my favorite things to, first and foremost, attend to and turn towards those feelings with curiosity and compassion in a safe container with a professional and your partner, to sit there and love the younger version of yourself who was not given those opportunities. But what I find is that when opening a marriage, when more sex is simply going to be used as the tool to have a human need met, my friends, that is the use of sex to provide us with something else. And most often in that experience, people, their bodies are going to end up being the things that are used. And we need to be really, really mindful of that. Because in my mind, that's swinging from one side of the pendulum to the other. That is unethical meets unethical. And in my line of work, human bodies, the attachment needs of every single human being out there are important. And I would hate for those of us who are leaving a space that was so controlling and hurtful to go out and cause further harm. And maybe it is that your partner does want you to experience these same things, but their attachment needs deserve to be met too. And there is a way for us to do that. There is a way for us to consider all of the various steps that we could take along the way. I am never going to negate your want as good. We will hear a phrase I use in my work all the time is, it is good to want. We are never, ever going to be shaming a sexual desire in a space with me. Nope, we are not. But we're also going to be turning towards our partner. If we've been in a monogamous relationship for 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to turn to all of the things that might shake and shift and create fear in their nervous system. And we are going to discuss all of the old beliefs that were in play and the new beliefs we are going to need to form, the new philosophies, the new value statements, the new understandings as partners. Because if you want to just go off and do your thing, then maybe it would be a better idea to dissolve the quote unquote marriage first, right? If you got married, I'm in big quotes here, everybody, under one premise and you have shifted as humans so much, it might be a good idea to rewrite some vows, to rewrite a new framework, a new relationship agreement. And there are ways that we can do this slowly and surely and beautifully and sexily, and different ways that we can play with the erotic mind, our intelligent erotic spaces that celebrate these desires and these things that you never got without just running out into this world of non-monogamy like a juvenile teenager with abandon and with the same lack of self-control, knowledge, ethics. I believe that we can experience sexual absolute liberation within an ethical framework. And it is one of my greatest joys to work with those who've come out of purity culture and are interested in reclaiming the years of sexual joy that they were robbed of.
Yeah. Wow. Boy, oh boy. This talk is right in line with my conference coming up in May. It's called Shameless Sexuality, Life After Purity Culture. And I invite all of our listeners, and I hope you'll share with your clients as well. They can go to shamelesssexuality.org, and we're holding it in Seattle. This time, it's the first time I'm doing it as an in-person event. And, one of the reasons I'm doing it right now is because Project 2025 is going to be unleashing a lot of sexual repression in the United States. I think people's access to sex education and sex health at some time might become restricted. So I want us to be speaking earnestly and compassionately, and with education to people who benefit from it. So that's happening in May. People can go to shamelesssexuality.org. How can people find you? How can they connect with you?
I would love for anyone to go to sexedforyou.com/free consult if you'd love to chat with me. If not, take off that /free consult, poke around on my website. I have a podcast with my partner called the Partnership Podcast, which is a fun and redemptive space. If you want to hear what Lauren has gone on to make her life into, I highly recommend my Partnership Podcast. I have a Sex Ed for You podcast as well, and a ton of free worksheets and and downloads on my website that I would love for you to explore and use. Please utilize all of that education that's in the Sex Ed for You podcast and all of the hilarity that is in the podcast with my partner. God bless him, having to live and exist with a purity culture survivor. He grew up in Southern California with a single mom who gave him great sex education and never dealt with any of this oppression. And there's a lot of fun and real conversations, and it has been a tremendous help for a lot of individuals out there. But if you listen to this podcast and you're saying, oh my goodness, I want someone to talk to, again, go to sexedforyou.com/free consult and fill out the little form. Tell me that you heard me on this wonderful Divorcing Religion podcast. And then I also am on Instagram at sex_ed_for_you. And there's a big community of about 20,000 people in there. And we talk and speak, and it's amazing and beautiful.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, I have loved having you as my guest today. I'm sure I will be inviting you back because there's even so much more we could talk about on this topic. So
we could take each of the topics and have a whole conversation. I know I was trying to keep my answers short, but I am just so thankful that your podcast exists in the world.
Excellent. Well, I thank you for joining me, and I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Please come back again soon and take care of you. Bye now.